My name is Elliot Finch. I'm 38 years old, and I've been a staff sergeant in the United States Army for the past 16 years. I've served 3 tours overseas, earned my stripes through discipline and dedication, and learned that respect isn't given. It's earned. What I never expected was that the hardest battle I'd face wouldn't be in some desert combat zone, but in my own family's living room in suburban Denver, Colorado. Growing up, my mother Judith never made it easy for me. While I was deployed in Afghanistan, earning my combat pay and sending money home to help with household expenses, she'd ignore my calls for weeks. When I finally managed to reach her, she'd cut conversations short, always too busy for her oldest son. Meanwhile, my younger brother Brent, 31 years old and still living in Mom's basement, could do no wrong in her eyes. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was dodging IEDs and earning my sergeant stripes, Brent was dropping out of community college for the 3rd time and racking up credit card debt. But somehow, I was always the disappointment. When I came home on leave, Mom would barely acknowledge my presence, but she'd fuss over Brent like he'd just won the Medal of Honor, instead of getting fired from another minimum wage job. 3 years ago, I married Leah, an Army nurse I met at Fort Carson. She's the kind of woman who sees through people's facades instantly, a skill that comes in handy when you're dealing with wounded soldiers who don't want to admit they're in pain. Leah saw what my family was doing to me long before I was ready to admit it myself. "Your mother uses you," she told me one evening as we sat in our small base apartment. "She takes your money, ignores your calls, and treats you like you're invisible. But the moment Brent needs something, suddenly you're family again." I brushed it off then. Family is family, right? That's what we tell ourselves when we don't want to face uncomfortable truths. But Leah was right, and deep down, I knew it. Last year, after completing my final deployment, I made the best investment of my life. Using my VA loan and years of saved combat pay, I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in Colorado Springs for $320,000. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Every square foot represented months of sacrifice, of eating MREs in the desert heat, of missing holidays and birthdays to serve my country. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly proud of something that belonged to me. Leah and I spent weekends at Home Depot, picking out fixtures and paint colors. We planted a small herb garden on the balcony. It was our sanctuary, our piece of the American dream earned through sweat and service. Then 3 weeks ago my phone rang. It was Mom, and her voice carried that familiar tone, the one she used when she needed something. "Elliot, we need to talk," she said without any pleasantries. "There's a family situation and I need you to come over this Sunday. Don't bring Leah. This is Finch family business." I should have known right then that trouble was coming. In 16 years of military service, I'd learned to recognize the warning signs of an ambush. But when it comes to family, we ignore our training. We walk straight into the kill zone because we want to believe that blood means something. That Sunday afternoon in July 2025, I drove my Ford F-150 to my childhood home in Lakewood, a modest ranch-style house that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the lawn needed work, and Mom's ancient Honda Civic sat in the driveway with a cracked windshield she'd been ignoring for months. I parked behind Brent's beat-up Nissan Altima and noticed the repo warning sticker on his rear window. Inside, the whole extended family had gathered. Uncle Ray and Aunt Margaret sat on the worn sectional sofa. Cousin Danny leaned against the kitchen doorway, and Mom occupied her usual spot in the faded recliner that had been Dad's before his heart attack 6 years ago. Brent slouched on a folding chair, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sit down, Elliot," Mom commanded without looking up from her hands. "We have a serious problem." I remained standing. Military training teaches you to maintain tactical advantage, and something about this setup felt wrong. What kind of problem requires an intervention? Uncle Ray cleared his throat. "It's about Brent's situation with those loan sharks down on Federal Boulevard." My blood went cold. Federal Boulevard was Denver's rough strip. Pawn shops, check-cashing stores, and worse. "How much?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. $47,000, Brent mumbled, not meeting my eyes. $47,000? The number hit me like a mortar blast. How do you even accumulate that kind of debt? "Sports betting," he said quietly. "Started small with DraftKings, then moved to some underground books when I got behind. They're charging 30% interest monthly now. I did the math in my head, standard Army skill. At that rate, the debt would nearly triple every few months." These weren't legitimate lenders. They were predators who specialized in breaking kneecaps when payments stopped coming. "The men came to the house last Tuesday," Mom said, finally looking at me with those manipulative eyes I remembered from childhood. "They told me they'd be back next month for the money or they'd take it out of Brent's hide." "So call the police," I suggested. "Loan sharking is illegal in Colorado." Aunt Margaret shook her head. "You can't involve law enforcement with these people, Elliot. They have connections." That's when Mom dropped the bombshell. "We need you to take out a home equity loan on your condo. $47,000 is nothing against a $320,000 property. You could get approved within a week." The room went silent except for the ticking of Dad's old grandfather clock. I stared at these people, my blood relatives, and felt something die inside my chest. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding I sacrifice my financial future for Brent's gambling addiction. "Absolutely not," I said calmly. Mom's face twisted into the expression I remembered from my teenage years. "This is your brother we're talking about. Family helps family. Where was this family loyalty when I was deployed?" I asked. "When I was sending $1,200 home every month to help with your mortgage payments, When I called from Kandahar and couldn't reach anyone for weeks, that was different, she snapped. You chose to join the army, and Brent chose to gamble away $47,000. Cousin Danny stepped forward. Come on, Elliot. You've got steady income, military benefits, and that condo is just sitting there building equity. This would barely dent your net worth. I almost laughed. These people had no idea what that condo represented. The years of sleeping in barracks, eating mess hall food, missing Christmas mornings and birthday parties. They saw a number on paper, not the sacrifice behind it. The answer is no, I repeated. Brent made his choices. He can live with the consequences. That's when Mom stood up from her chair, crossed the room, and slapped me across the face. The sound echoed through the living room like a gunshot. 38 years old, decorated combat veteran, and my mother had just struck me like a disobedient child. The sting wasn't physical. It was the humiliation of being assaulted in front of family members who sat there in stunned silence. You selfish bastard, she hissed. Your brother could die because of your greed. I touched my cheek where her hand had landed, feeling the heat spread across my face. In that moment, 16 years of military discipline kept me from responding the way my anger demanded. Instead, I looked around the room at these people who shared my DNA but had never truly been my family. I'm leaving, I said quietly, and I won't be coming back. Uncle Ray finally spoke up. Elliot, she didn't mean it. She's just scared for Brent. Yes, she did mean it, I replied, walking toward the door, and now she'll have to live with it. As I drove home to Colorado Springs, my phone buzzed with text messages. Uncle Ray pleading for understanding. Aunt Margaret suggesting we talk this through like adults. And finally, a message from Brent. Thanks for nothing, big brother. I deleted them all without responding. When I walked into my condo, Leah took one look at my face and knew exactly what had happened. They asked for money, she said. It wasn't a question. $47,000. They wanted me to mortgage our home. And when you said no, Mom slapped me in front of everyone. Leah's expression hardened. As an army nurse, she'd seen enough abuse to recognize it instantly. What are you going to do? I looked around our living room. Our wedding photos on the mantel. The furniture we'd picked out together. The life we'd built with honor and hard work. I'm going to protect what we've earned, and I'm going to make sure they can never threaten it again. The next morning, I called in sick to Fort Carson for the first time in 3 years. Leah had already left for her shift at the base hospital, but not before making me promise to handle this the smart way. She knew me well enough to recognize when I was shifting into tactical mode. I spent the morning researching private investigators in the Colorado Springs area. Military experience had taught me that good intelligence wins more battles than raw firepower. I needed facts, documentation, and a clear picture of what I was dealing with before making any moves. By noon, I was sitting across from Patricia Valdez, a former Denver police detective who now ran her own investigation firm. Her office was small but professional, with case files stacked neatly on metal shelves and a Colorado state flag hanging behind her desk. "I need to know everything about my family's financial situation," I told her. "Bank records, credit reports, property liens, whatever you can legally access." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "What's prompting this request?" I explained the situation without emotion, sticking to facts. The gambling debt, the demand for my home equity, the physical assault. Patricia took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "How long has your brother been living with your mother?" she asked. "Since he dropped out of community college 7 years ago. And you mentioned sending money home during your deployments. How much and for how long?" I pulled out my phone and showed her my banking app. $1,200 monthly for 5 years, from 2019 to 2024, supposedly to help with Mom's mortgage payments. Patricia's eyebrows raised slightly. "That's $72,000 over 5 years. Did you ever receive documentation showing how this money was used?" "No. I trusted it was going toward household expenses." "Big mistake," she said bluntly. "In my experience, families who demand financial transparency usually have something to hide. Give me 1 week and I'll have a complete financial profile on both your mother and brother." That afternoon, I drove to USAA Federal Savings Bank and met with my mortgage advisor, Jennifer Walsh. We'd worked together when I first bought the condo, and she remembered my file immediately. "I want to understand my options if someone tries to force me into a home equity loan," I explained. Jennifer pulled up my account on her computer. "Well, the good news is that nobody can force you to borrow against your property without your signature and consent. Your credit score is 810, so you'd qualify for prime rates, but..." "I'm not looking to actually borrow money," I interrupted. "I want to know how to protect myself from financial coercion." She nodded knowingly. "Family pressure? I see it more often than you'd think. The best protection is documentation. Keep records of all communications. Never sign anything under duress. And consider adding your spouse to the deed if she isn't already listed." "Leah's name is already on there," I confirmed. "Good. That means any attempt to use your property as collateral would require both signatures. You're already protected." I left the bank feeling more confident, but the real breakthrough came 3 days later when Patricia called. "You need to come in immediately," she said. "What I found is worse than identity theft." Her office felt different this time, more serious, like a briefing room before a dangerous mission. Patricia had spread documents across her conference table like intelligence reports. "Your mother has been using your social security number to open credit accounts for the past 6 years," she began. "3 credit cards, 2 personal loans, and a line of credit at a furniture store. Total outstanding balance, $28,000. My hands clenched into fists. How is that possible? Easy, when she has access to your personal information and knows your service history. Look at this application from 2020. She handed me a copy. She listed your military salary, your service record, even your deployment schedule. The lenders never verified because your credit was perfect. I studied the paperwork, recognizing my mother's handwriting on forms that bore my forged signature. This is fraud. Textbook identity theft, Patricia confirmed. But wait, there's more. Remember that $72,000 you sent home? I traced those deposits. Less than $12,000 actually went toward your mother's mortgage. The rest was transferred to accounts belonging to your brother. The room started spinning. 5 years of deployment money I'd earned dodging Taliban rockets and IEDs, had been stolen to fund Brent's lifestyle while I was risking my life overseas. There's one more thing, Patricia continued. Your father's will. I obtained a copy from Jefferson County probate records. He left you 50% of the house and specified that your portion should be held in trust until you turned 35. I never received anything when I turned 35 3 years ago because your mother filed documents claiming you'd waived your inheritance rights while deployed. She forged your signature on the waiver. I sat there absorbing the scope of their betrayal. This wasn't just about refusing to bail out Brent's gambling debt. My own family had been systematically robbing me for years. They'd stolen my identity, my inheritance, and my deployment earnings while I was serving my country. What are my legal options? I asked. Patricia handed me a business card. Ryan Martinez is the best financial crimes attorney in Colorado. With this evidence, you could file criminal charges and civil suits. Your mother could face 5 to 10 years in federal prison for identity theft alone. That evening, I sat with Leah at our kitchen table, spreading Patricia's findings across the surface like enemy intelligence. My wife's face went through a range of emotions. Shock, anger, then cold determination. They've been stealing from you since before we even met, she said quietly. The money I thought was helping Mom with her mortgage was actually funding Brent's gambling habit. Every dollar I sent home from Afghanistan was a lie. Leah picked up the forged inheritance waiver. This is unforgivable. Your father wanted you to have half that house and she stole it. $47,000 in gambling debt suddenly makes more sense, I realized. Brent's been living off my deployment money for years. When that ran out, he turned to loan sharks. What's your next move? I looked at the evidence spread before us, bank records, forged documents, credit applications bearing my stolen identity. In the Army, we called this actionable intelligence. Everything needed to destroy my enemies was right here in black and white. Tomorrow, I'm filing a complaint with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, I said. Then I'm meeting with Ryan Martinez to discuss civil proceedings. They wanted to use my assets to solve their problems. Let's see how they handle losing everything they've stolen. Leah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. This is the right way to fight back. For the first time in days, I smiled. Mom always said I was too stubborn for my own good. She's about to find out just how stubborn a combat veteran can be when someone steals from him. Ryan Martinez's law office occupies with views of Pikes Peak that reminded me why I'd chosen to make this state my home. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, but his reputation for financial crimes prosecution spoke for itself. This is one of the most comprehensive identity theft cases I've seen, he said after reviewing Patricia's evidence. Your mother didn't just steal money. She created an entire shadow financial identity using your credentials. What kind of damages are we talking about? I asked. Ryan pulled out a calculator and started adding figures. 72,000 in misappropriated deployment funds, 28,000 in fraudulent debt, plus the inheritance theft. Conservatively, your father's half of that Lakewood house is worth about 120,000 in today's market. We're looking at close to 220,000 in damages. And criminal charges? Identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud, and forgery. Federal charges carry serious prison time. He leaned forward. But I have to ask, are you prepared for the nuclear option? Once we file, there's no going back. Your mother will likely face criminal prosecution. I thought about that slap across my face, the years of emotional manipulation, the theft of my father's final gift to me. She made her choice when she decided to steal from a deployed soldier. I'm making mine now. The next morning, I walked into the Denver FBI field office and filed a formal complaint for identity theft and wire fraud. Agent Sarah Mitchell, a specialist in financial crimes, took my statement and reviewed the evidence Patricia had compiled. We'll need to coordinate with the U.S. Attorney's Office, she explained. Cases involving military personnel and deployment funds get priority treatment. Expect search warrants within 72 hours. While federal agents prepared their case, I took care of personal business. I opened new bank accounts, changed all my passwords, and placed fraud alerts on my credit reports. Every financial connection to my family needed to be severed completely. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing with frantic calls. Uncle Ray first, then Aunt Margaret, finally Brent himself. I didn't answer any of them. Whatever panic was spreading through the Finch family tree, it was just getting started. The search warrant execution happened on a Thursday morning. Agent Mitchell called to inform me that federal agents had seized computers, financial documents, and banking records from Mom's house. Brent had been present during the search and was questioned about the fraudulent accounts. Your mother retained a public defender, Mitchell reported. She's claiming she had permission to use your identity, but we found no documentation supporting that claim. That afternoon, Ryan Martinez received a call from Mom's attorney requesting a meeting to discuss resolution. I agreed to hear their proposal, though I'd already decided nothing could undo years of systematic theft. The meeting took place at Ryan's office the following Monday. Mom's public defender, a tired-looking man named Frank Morrison, sat across from us with a folder of documents. My client acknowledges certain financial irregularities, he began carefully. She's prepared to enter a payment plan to resolve the outstanding debts. Your client committed federal crimes, Ryan replied coldly. We're not negotiating repayment schedules. Morrison tried a different approach. Mrs. Finch is 61 years old with no prior criminal record. Prison time would be devastating for someone her age. She should have considered that before stealing from her deployed son, I said. How much did she think she could take before I noticed? The lawyer shuffled his papers nervously. Perhaps we could discuss a plea agreement, full restitution in exchange for reduced charges. Ryan looked at me and I shook my head. No deals. She made her bed. She can sleep in it. 3 weeks later, the dominoes started falling exactly as I'd predicted. The federal prosecutor indicted Mom on 5 felony counts. The Colorado Attorney General filed additional state charges for forgery and theft. Meanwhile, the fraudulent debts she'd accumulated in my name were transferred back to her credit reports, destroying her credit score overnight. Unable to make payments on multiple loans and facing legal fees, Mom was forced to put the Lakewood house up for sale. The irony was perfect. The same property she'd stolen from me was now being liquidated to pay for lawyers to defend her theft. Brent's situation deteriorated even faster. Without Mom's financial support or access to my stolen identity, he couldn't make minimum payments on his legitimate debts, let alone deal with the loan sharks on Federal Boulevard. He moved out of Mom's house just before the foreclosure proceedings began, disappearing into Denver's homeless community. The extended family's attempts at reconciliation came through social media messages and intermediaries. Cousin Danny sent multiple texts claiming Mom was just trying to help family. Uncle Ray called Leah directly, pleading for us to show mercy. I blocked them all systematically, cutting every connection to the toxic web they'd created. 6 months after that slap across my face, I received 2 pieces of mail that brought the story full circle. The first was a notice from Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. The foreclosure sale of Mom's house had been completed, with proceeds going toward legal fees and restitution. The second was a letter from the Colorado Department of Corrections. Judith Finch had been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for identity theft and wire fraud. That evening, Leah and I sat on our condo balcony watching the sunset paint the Rocky Mountains gold and purple. We'd just returned from a weekend in Cannon Beach, Oregon, where we'd put a down payment on a beachfront cottage, our retirement dream home, funded by the restitution payments and inheritance recovery. Do you ever regret how it ended? Leah asked, holding her wine glass up to catch the last rays of sunlight. I thought about it honestly. 4 years in prison was a harsh sentence for a 61-year-old woman, but she'd stolen from a deployed soldier for 7 years without remorse. The loan sharks had eventually found Brent, though from what I'd heard, they'd settled for collecting his car and electronics rather than breaking bones. They made their choices, I said finally. I just made sure they faced the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Valdez. She'd been monitoring the situation to ensure no additional fraudulent accounts clean credit report came through today. Her message read, "You're completely clear." I showed the text to Leah and she smiled. So, it's really over. The financial part, yes. The emotional part ended the day Mom decided a slap was more important than her relationship with her oldest son. We finished our wine as darkness settled over Colorado Springs. Tomorrow, I'd return to my duties at Fort Carson, serving my country with the same honor and dedication I'd maintained throughout this ordeal. The difference was that now I was truly free. Free from manipulation, free from stolen identity, and free from people who saw my success as their opportunity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be a victim and letting justice take its natural course. Mom wanted to use my assets to solve her problems. Instead, she lost everything she'd tried to protect while I kept everything I'd earned. In the end, that's what happens when you try to steal from someone who spent 16 years learning how to defend what matters most. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling us what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to receive alerts for new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.